Thank you for participating in the CCS Organic System Plan, or OSP 101. This webinar is offered to the Farmers Reach and Farmers Guild members as part of the partnership with CCOF. I'm Robin Boyle, the Director of Marketing for CCOF, and I'll be your moderator. Our speakers today are Elizabeth Whitlow, Inspector Operations Supervisor, and Jane Wade, Applicant Support Specialist. They're both with CCOF. Elizabeth and Jane will walk you through how to complete your own OSP for your operation. So be sure to have that blank OSP that we provided earlier so you can fill it out as we go along. Before we begin, I'd like to cover how to participate today. You'll notice on the right side of your screen there is a panel of boxes. Elizabeth and Jane will be stopping periodically to allow time for questions. So if you wish to ask a question, just please raise your hand. There's a little, you'll notice in the attendee little box, there should be a little hand icon up in the top there. And if you have a question, you just press on that. And then what we'll do is unmute you, and you can ask your question. Or you can simply just use the chat feature that you'll see in the chat window there. You could type in your question, and then we'll be able to recite that out to Elizabeth and Jane to address it. I guess we're ready to start. We'll take it away with Jane. No. Oh, and Elizabeth. Elizabeth, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Robin. Good morning, everybody. Really glad to have you here this morning, and just to try and help you through this process and make it as easy, as painless as possible to fill out your organic system plan. We are wide open to your questions and want to make sure that you all can participate and ask all the questions you need to ask. So please feel free to raise your hand if something's not clear, or interject, and Jane and I will be happy to answer them. Jane Wade is our application support specialist, and you'll be hearing from her today, and she's always available for you by phone or email down in our main office. So with that, Jane, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope, just let's get through it. Let's see what we can do, how far we can get these people move forward.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my cam and jump right into the OSP. And hopefully you all have gotten the OSPs by email, and you've got those with you. What we'd really love to see is to work you through this application today, and we'll just go through it page by page and get it filled out so you can get it submitted and we can get out to see you. The main thing, like just starting here on the, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit. Let's get up there, the certification application form. You're going to want to just describe your business and describe what type of business you're running, and then give us any other details. This contact information here is for the primary contact for CCOF. There are also occasionally people with other managers or your spouse or your farming partner that you want to be sure you list. If you don't list them and they call CCOF, or they need to add a material, or we show up for an inspection and they're there and they're not authorized to conduct inspections or talk to CCOF about you, then we won't be able to give them any information. So just make sure you consider that when you're filling out the form. And the other really important part here on that first page is that you sign this document. We often receive applications where people neglect to sign this very first page. So, and then we have to kick it back to you. So one of the reasons that we wanted to do this with you today is just kind of help you identify any of these little pitfalls or things that kind of slow the application process down. So make sure you print and sign there. This next page, the certification program information. This relates to which organic standard program you're applying for. If you're exporting, entering the global market program, then here's your opportunity to describe that to us, and we do have additional programs that will cover you for exporting. We also, it's really important to know if you do both organic and non-organic products. So make sure you consider that in filling out this section. On this item number 4, when do you anticipate the need for certification? This is typically it takes 2 to 3 months to get certified. If you get your application in quickly and you're up in this region in the North Coast, then I have inspectors available and can get someone out to see you pretty quickly. If you're in another region, I can't guarantee that. There's available inspectors, so it's really important if you've got crop coming that you want to claim or sell as organic that you get the application in so we can get you in the process. If you put a date here of certification, or a short date like in the next 3 weeks or something, and CCOF, the reviewer, is going to get it and they're going to contact you and offer the expedited program, which will cost a significant amount extra, $1,400 extra, and you would get certified within a week, most likely. So if you do have crop, high-value crop, ready to get to market, we offer this program. Hopefully none of you are in that situation. It's the whole point here with the partnership with the Farmers Guild is to try and save you all some money and help you get into the program in a way that is cost-effective as possible, and which is why CCOF is willing to waive the $325 application fee for you. These other questions, if you're certified or previously certified, if there are any questions, raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep moving through this. The California Organic Registration. This is a program that is administered through the CDFA, and it's a registration program that is, well, you'll fill it out. You go online to fill it out, and this is something that you have to begin the process of before or in tandem with getting certified. And just a couple tips on this, that you can go to their website, the California Department of Food and Ag's website, to begin the process. Keep a copy of the application to the CDFA and keep a copy of your payment to the CDFA, so that you can show our inspectors when they come out that you have begun this process. And just write pending here, because you won't have your CDFA organic registration number yet. Just write pending. You can show the copies of your registration to the inspector, and then CCOF will just move on and be able to issue your certification. The really important thing about going through the organic registration process with the state of California is that it's how your funds will be distributed for the cost share program. And if you're not familiar with the cost share program, this is a program that was just recently came back through the Farm Bill, where organic growers can get reimbursed for up to 75% of the cost of certification. And so this is something that we highly encourage all of our clients to apply for. It's it will reimburse you up to $750 for your certification, and it's a pretty straightforward process. And we've got links on the front page of our website for you, so you can click on that. And then once you go through all the certification cost, you can save your invoices and submit them to get reimbursed for that $750. So essentially, this, with the $325 waiver from CCOF and the cost share program administered by the CDFA, you will reduce your cost of certification and maybe end up paying $200 or $300 this year for your certification. I've got, let's see, I'm sorry, I've got that up on our website, and if you haven't been to our website, we've got a lot of great information there about the organic cost share program and how to go through it, how to get your money back. Our accounting department is always happy to help you. If you do happen to misplace your invoice or something and you need a copy of it, you can contact our accounting department and they'll help you get that together. So here, the last part on this section is the annual certification fee. And we ask you to project your current or expected gross organic sales for this year. And Jane is the one who makes this really great point. Don't overestimate your gross organic sales. We'll catch up to you in the next year, but for this year, just be prudent and keep yourself in maybe in the lower fee bracket until you verify that you're selling what you think you're going to sell or what you project to sell. I'm going to pull this over here. Let me see. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay and I'm not bouncing around too much. We've got a fee table in Manual 1, and it will outline the fees that you're going to pay based on your projected gross organic production value. So if you look here, I've circled the 3 fee brackets that are under $50,000 a year in organic production. If you're above $50,000, then you're going to be in this $575 a year. Many of you, I think, are beginning, and you may be in these brackets of, say, $20,000 to $50,000. And if you're selling $20,000 to $50,000 a year, for example, you'll pay $375 for your annual fee with CCOF. If you are a mixed operation or you include livestock, less than 10 mammals or less than 200 laying hens or poultry, then you can stay in these minimum fee brackets. But otherwise, if you are a mixed operation, it puts you in the minimum of $375. And for livestock, if you're above these numbers, then your minimum fee will be $525 for the year. The other fee that you need to consider is the inspection fee. And just see if I can blow this up a little bit. It might be hard to read. Jane, can you see that? Can you read that okay on the screen?
Yeah, pretty much.
How about that?
That's better.
There we go. So yeah, the inspection fee is this. You have to plan for this every year. We come out and see you every year, and we bill inspections hourly, time and materials, and they also include travel cost. The majority of our inspections are less than $500, but for a small vegetable farm around these areas where we have a lot of inspectors in the Central Coast and the North Coast, you know, it could be less than that. It could be $300 or $400 for the year. But we do have checklists and guidelines to help you make sure you're prepared for your inspection so that you can keep it as efficient as possible. The more you prepare for your inspection and the more you have available for the inspector to review in an organized manner, it'll just keep your inspection costs down. Jane, can you see if there are any questions?
Well, there was one question and one thing that I kind of wanted to address, and that was the filling out of the forms. The forms themselves are not online, but they are, when we sent them out to you, we sent them in 2 versions. One was the paper-only PDF, which you can look at easily on your screen and is essentially what Elizabeth is using right now. But there's also a zip folder full of e-forms that are fillable in your computer. And you can fill them out and you can email them in. Now, the question that came up was about electronic signatures. No, we cannot accept electronic signatures because this page is a legal document, as is when we get to your parcel information form and you're telling us about your land history for the past 3 years. It's like an affidavit. So you have to, it's a legal document. It needs a physical signature. But we've had a lot of people who will send in the whole application by email, print and sign, and then fax back just the pages that need signatures on them so that we have them with a real live signature on it. Someday we may be able to do this online, but the technology's not there yet for us to do it that way. So this is what we've done to make it possible for you to do it in your computer, but without actually doing it online. So I just wanted to mention that at any time in the future, if you want to get in touch with me, my email is attached to the application that was sent to you. It's jwade, W-A-D-E, @ccof.org, and I'd be happy to walk you through any of these little kind of technical, glitchy kinds of things.
Okay, we also have a question here from Rebecca Black. Okay.
And you're unmuted now, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple of questions. We're raising livestock, pigs and sheep, and what we like to do is certify the pasture as organic because we give them secondary feed like from the breweries, the spent barley from breweries, and that's not organic. So we wanted to certify the pasture rather than the animals. So because of that, I have a couple things. I'm a part of the form where it says if it's organic and non-organic. Are are we selling something that's both organic and not organic, or how would that work?
Elizabeth, would we divide that, because the growing part, the grower forms, would all be, the only part that she's talking about certifying in this case would be the grower part.
That's
not the
right.
live part.
Yeah.
So the grower part's not a mixed operation, right? So we're really, would she say no, it's not, or she would say yes, it is?
It is not a mixed operation if she's just applying for growing. So,
Right.
Rebecca, if you were selling, like if you were producing a non-organic forages or something and selling that, then you would be a mixed operation. But your livestock are, just because they are not being fed organic feed does not mean that they are make your operation mixed.
Well, the issue with mixed operations in part is making sure that there's no commingling or cross-contamination between the conventional and organic parts. So if you're growing rice and you're growing some conventional and some organic, there's a potential for cross-contamination and commingling. Your cows, pigs are not contaminating your grass, which is your crop. Your crop is your grass on your pasture.
Okay. So I'm only applying. So I'm only organic then.
Yes,
And
you're only organic, and you're only applying as a grower. And if you want to bring the livestock in later, you can do that, but you don't need to worry about it now.
okay. And then for the projected gross organic sales, I'm not actually selling the grass from the pasture. I'm just selling the animals that eat it. So would I have like a zero? How does that work?
You would be in the probably in the lowest bracket. You could look at it like you could look at comparable rates for grazing on like per acre or something. And
Like if you were leasing, Elizabeth, if they were leasing or if the acreage was being leased out, what that revenue would be?
yeah, I mean that would be the equivalent gross organic projection. Like if you were leasing it out or producing for hay or something off that, what would that end up being? I mean, how many acres are you, Rebecca?
We have two properties. One is at 7 acres and one is 10 acres.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would be fair enough to say that you would be in the lowest fee bracket.
Okay.
That
So any estimate under $10,000 will put you into that bracket. So just put in 6,000 and we'll sort it out later if it turns out to be different than that.
Okay.
We've got one more question from Lalita Vish, Elizabeth, and it is, will the inspection fees be less than $500 if the farm is part of a collective, i.e. 2 to 3 farms as part of a group of farms at the same location, but each one being a separate entity?
Huh. That would be interesting. If each farm is a separate entity and we're inspecting 2 different operations when we're out there, that would require the inspector to submit 2 separate reports and maintain, there would be 2 separate OSPs to review. So I'm not sure how that would work.
Separate entities need to be separately certified, right, Elizabeth?
Yes. Unless, I mean, in some cases, if they have the same management system, we have done this for like a kind of an informal grower group.
But is that going? But I think that there's some question about whether that will be allowed under the new regulation.
Yeah, that I'm not sure how that would fall out, but it sounds like we would have to have more conversation with you and hear a little bit more details about that. We can't guarantee that the inspection fee will be under $500 either. I mean, that's just that probably 80% of the inspection fees are under $500, and it really depends on what happens when the inspector gets out there. If they were doing 2 different inspections or inspecting 2 different management systems, then those would be billed separately. I'm not sure if that fully answers the question. I think that we would need more details to really get into that. Do you have anything to add to that, Jane?
No, I just think that some of this stuff is really specific, and if you want to email me, I can ask. I've got a question about the NOP has changed kind of how we are allowed to group people together as a single entity, and I'm not quite sure how that applies to farms. And I would like to check with our certification staff, management staff, to ask them how that would apply. So if you would email me at jwade@ccof.org your specific question, then I can get the answer and email it back. That's kind of the best way for things that are not easy to answer at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
That's it for now.
Okay. So page 4 here is the certification contract and agreement, and just want to point out, this is a legally binding contract, and you know, just make sure that you read and you're clear on everything here that you're signing off on, and then again, there's a hard signature required here on this page. So I'm going to just move on from there. We're not going to review each and every one of those items, though they're all important. Robin Boyle, or Jane, I think, is going to discuss this public profile.
Yeah, this is, CCOF is both a certification agency and a trade association, and we take our task of helping you promote your business very seriously. And one of the things we do is we have an online directory. We also have a print directory, but the online directory is a little more up-to-date because it can be changed all the time. And if you go in and look at it when we're done with the webinar, and you go in and look at our directory on our homepage, on the blue bar up at the top, right in the middle, it says directory. And if you click through to that, you can see how each operation that we certify has its own profile page. And on that page, you have the opportunity to tell a little something about what you do, like if you run a CSA, you can tell us about the CSA, or if you just want to promote your business a little bit, you can do that. And we give links to your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and then we list the ways that you sell your products. So if people are looking for a CSA, or if they're looking for someone who goes to their local farmer's market, they can find it on, you would be searched. It's a searchable database. So if you put down that you're a CSA, then when they click on CSA and bring that search up, you're going to be on there. So it's important, though this page is technically optional, it's an important one for you to fill out. And then once you get certified, you can go into My CCOF, which I think we'll talk about a little bit sometime today, and which is your online portal to your account, and you can update your public profile. This is called your public profile. And you can update your public profile at any time, and then within a few days it will show up on the directory on the website. And you know, you can keep updating it as you change. Like if your crops change each year, you can go in and list what crops, you know, in your description. Scroll down a little bit, Elizabeth. There's a description. There's a free text box, company statement, and that shows up at the top left of your page, your profile page, and you can change that pretty much at will. So this is something that we're really trying to make it useful for you and also useful for the consumers that are looking for you. That do it, Elizabeth?
I think that's great.
Okay, we have a question.
Sure.
From Martin Pedley. Do annual fees run on the calendar year? If so, are fees prorated if you start mid-year?
No. No. The first year is an estimate, and unless you come in the last month of the year, you're going to pay the full year's fees. From that point on, every contract renewal comes into you in November. Your contract year is January through December, and you will pay your annual fees. You'll get your invoice in November with your contract renewal, and you'll pay them. They'll be due in January. So there is no proration, but there is cost share. So if you get it in by the end of September, if you get certified by the end of September, you can get cost share for this year and get those fees covered. And there's never any proration for inspection fees. Inspection fees are time and travel, cost for the inspectors.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add to that, Elizabeth?
No, I think that's good. I mean, if somebody comes in like end of October, November or something, and we don't get them certified.
If they come in after the contract renewals go out,
yeah,
they are in the next season.
Yeah.
And then they don't get charged.
Right, and we have done some case-by-case basis on that. But in this, like you said, in this year especially, now that we've got the cost share back in the Farm Bill, we want to get that money for organic growers. And you should get certified and get everything done by the end of September, which is when that that's the calendar year for the cost share. It has to be October 2013 through September 30th, 2014. You will be eligible for that reimbursement. And yeah.
And then there'll be another round next year, but we're trying to get as much of it spent down this year as possible. If we in this state do not spend down this organic money, they might decide we don't need it.
Exactly.
So we're trying to get as many of our people as possible to get through the process by the end of September, pay all their bills, and then they're eligible for this federal fiscal year's cost share program. You could bump it over into the next year, but then you can't get next year's fees paid off of next year. So
yeah.
If you're worried about the money, get the paperwork in quickly, get through the process, and get this year's cost share money.
And we have a fair bit more money to spend this year than we had in the past. And so I think it's something we really have to encourage growers to do, make sure they tap into that so we can keep getting the money.
Elizabeth, can I suggest that we, and Molly, that we hold off on the questions a bit until that we kind of group them together? So, because I want to make sure that we have time to move through everything.
Sure.
That work for you?
Yeah, no problem. Moving on to the G1.0, this is the beginning of the organic system plan and you helping us understand what your operation is all about. So this first question is you can attach a description or try and squeeze it in here and try and keep it somewhat simple. I mean, this is a description about what you do, not exactly how you do it. The rest of this OSP form will cover how you do it, but here you can put something pretty basic, like I grow 8 acres of mixed fruits and vegetables that are all organic. I sell it through my CSA and at a local farmer's market. Or I have 100 acres of organic rice. I also grow conventional rice. I sell the organic rice strictly to the Lundbergs. And just keep it pretty simple. What kind of product, what kind of crop, whether you're mixed, and how you sell it. Anything to add to that, Jane?
Yeah, I would say that when you're writing this, you want to keep it simple, but you want to do kind of a snapshot of your operation because the reviewer is going to be looking at the rest of this application and trying to determine what you should reply to and what doesn't apply to you. So for instance, if you're a mixed operation, there's going to be more questions to answer. If you're selling at farmers market, or CSA, you may need to do the direct marketing form. So the reviewer's looking at this and you're kind of saying, this is your jumping off point, this is what I'm going to tell you about. And it helps the reviewer not have to keep back and forthing when they go through reviewing your application. And any time that you can do that, you're making the process faster for you.
Right. So this is a checklist here that I've got on the screen now, so you can see which forms, which are the required OSP sections based on your organic activities. And we're going to go through each of these forms right now, and hopefully you all have your OSPs out and you're taking notes and starting to fill them out. And as we get through a couple of these pages, we'll stop and ask if you have any questions. I'm just going to keep moving forward, though, instead of dwelling on this, unless you wanted to say anything else, Jane.
No, I was just going to say that if when you're really looking at this, look at the list of the 17 activities. If it applies to you on the left-hand side, then the right-hand side you need to do those forms. If it doesn't apply to you, then don't get confused by the forms. You know, sort out the ones that apply to you and ignore the rest of them. Or you'll keep tripping over questions that don't make any sense because they don't apply to you.
Right. Okay. So with that, I'm going to jump into the parcel information. So this is where you have the chance to describe your parcel location, what you call it, your field name, especially if you're entering multiple parcels or multiple fields, you know, back 40, barn, well, spring, whatever you call it, whatever you commonly call it, especially in your record keeping, is what you should call it here, because it's a name that the inspectors will be referencing and the reviewers are going to reference. So don't try and make up any names for us, like Field A, if you don't call it Field A. If it's the hill parcel, call it the hill parcel. Give us the street address and the county's the rest of this information is pretty self-explanatory. When did you begin managing the parcel? This is important because this is where you're going to begin to establish the eligibility on when the last potential prohibited material application was made on this land, and when you plan to harvest a certified organic crop. The total acres to be certified, they may be different. It may be that you've got a 20-acre ranch and you're only planning to certify 5 acres. I mean, Jane, what do you usually recommend that people, I would say include the 20 acres, and unless they're managing some of it non-organically, but I would say include the whole ranch or the whole farm in there, so that later, should you decide to add more crops or crop more areas, then you can just add them in there. You don't have to submit a second and additional parcel info form.
Right. Keep in mind, we do this intentionally. We do not charge you by acres. We don't want you making farm and business decisions based on how much it's going to cost you to certify that land. If you're making money off that land, then it's factored into your organic production value and you'll pay a fee on it. If it's fallow, it's not costing you any more, except maybe the inspector has to walk around a little longer to look at your larger parcel. If you've got 2 parcels, you're going to do 2 of these forms. The question we had earlier was about 2 separate acres. You're going to do 2 separate forms, one for each non-contiguous parcel. Right, Elizabeth? I think we lost Elizabeth.
Yep, sorry, I was muting myself because my phone was ringing.
Too many phones,
Yep.
too much technology. So,
I know.
So I was saying in non-contiguous parcels, separate forms. If they're if they're right next to each other and they've got 2 assessor parcel numbers, as long as they're right next to each other, we will treat them as one parcel. If they're separate from each other, not just across the road, but down the street or across town, those are separate parcels. Or if they have separate eligibility dates. If you've got one that's ready to get certified now and one that you've got 1 more year to go, but you want to bring it in as transitional, 2 separate forms.
Yep.
Okay?
Excellent. And then the crops. Here is another one where it's who's your buyer. If you're selling to Whole Foods, they will want to see the specific crop listed on your certificate. So you should list each crop that you're growing. I always encourage people to say mixed vegetables, 2 acres. Keep it simple, and that way you're not held to these specific crops every time we come out or having to constantly update and change this information. So, Jane, any other tips on that?
No, that's exactly what I say too. It depends on your buyer, and it's also, this is one of those things that you can change in the future. You know, most of this stuff you're not locking in place. What you're doing is, this is what's going on with our parcel now. This is what's been happening with it for the last 3 years. And then once you get your organic system plan completed, we're going to get it certified for what you're doing now. And then you're going to update it as you change things. So it's not locked in place. It's just, you know, you're kind of your starting point. So if you end up selling to Whole Foods and they want you to separately list all those mixed fruits and veggies, then you can go back and relist them. We can change that.
Or maybe you're just selling kale to Whole Foods, and so then you
maybe
can
you're just selling kale, right?
And then this next section is the boundaries and buffers. And there's always a lot of question around this. And I would just say that this is very site-specific, and we can talk about it with you in detail one-on-one, or if there's some generic questions about it, we can talk about it. But basically, the inspectors come out. It's really one of the main reasons we're out there. We're going to look at your buffers, look at your borders, see what the neighboring activities are, look at the topography, prevailing winds, and discuss your observations and experiences on that parcel, whether you think that your neighbors would be amenable perhaps to you managing their fence line if they're using Roundup along their fence line, or if there's some way to work with your neighbor to ensure that there is no potential for any kind of contamination or drift, then you can describe that to us. We're flexible in allowing you to develop these kind of solutions at the borders so that you don't have to have a buffer crop. But if you've got a neighbor who will not work with you, they're going to spray, and you can't prevent the potential drift, then there's other solutions, you know, planting hedgerows or taking a certain width of area that you call non-organic, and you say you've got a row of apple trees that is potentially absorbing drift from a nearby conventional vineyard, then you would leave that row as non-organic and donate the apples or give them away and just document that each year that you did not harvest and sell them as organic. Ideally, you can find a happy solution with the neighboring operation, but here's your chance to describe that to us, and then when the inspector comes out, they're going to verify it, and they'll make their recommendations based on what they see in the field. The map's pretty clear. You can easily get a Google map nowadays and print that out and draw in all these different types of neighboring land uses and landmarks and whatnot. We'd like to know about existing installations of treated lumber. Treated lumber, once you're certified organic, you may not use any treated lumber, even old treated lumber that's been laying around and has probably long leached into the soil. That is still not allowed to be used. If you have treated lumber in the ground, then when we get out there, we'll get an inventory of it and then ensure that you don't put any more out there. After that, you're using redwood or juniper or metal, some other material. Also with irrigation, you know, to prevent any potential fertigation or other types of non-allowed, non-approved materials from entering into your field, you need to be able to show that you've got a backflow prevention device or something. Land history, here we need to know the date of the last prohibited material. Historically, people would go to the county and get a copy of the pesticide use permit, and you can do that if you'd like to use that to show us when the last prohibited material was. You also could get a signed and dated affidavit from the previous landowner or manager of the land that tells what all the input materials were for the last 3 years, and there's a table that follows on this. I'll just flip down there. And Jane, do you want to add what we talked about the other day where we were talking about, you were saying, you know, local organic farmers, another certified organic farmer may also be a resource for somebody if you've got an unknown land history and you're trying to figure it out.
Right. Occasionally you'll get a situation where you've got like an abandoned orchard or land that's been fallow, and maybe you bought it or leased it out of foreclosure and you can't get any information from the previous owner. We even had one where the previous owner was in Saudi Arabia and we couldn't get in touch with him. If you can find it's my experience that farmers know about what's going on in their neighborhoods, and organic farmers seem to know even more than regular farmers about what everybody's doing on their land. And if you can find a certified organic farmer who knows that parcel and can say, yeah, I know it's just been sitting there fallow and they haven't done anything to it. Or I knew the owner and he died and I know he didn't do anything to it. And because they're a certified organic farmer, we know that they understand the requirement. It's not just someone who doesn't know very much saying, well, I don't think they did anything over there. It's somebody who knows exactly the requirements for certified organic production and is saying, yeah, I've been keeping an eye on that. I was thinking of maybe leasing that myself. So I've been keeping an eye on it, and I know nothing's been happening to that land. If you can get a letter from someone like that, then it's something that we're really willing to look at, especially if it's one of our certified clients, because we know them, we know we can talk to them, and we understand how much knowledge they have. So that's kind of a fallback position. If you can't get firsthand history, it doesn't mean that you have to wait the 3 years if there's an option like this to fall back on.
Right. So, and here is another place, don't forget, another legal document. You need to make sure there's a hard signature on there.
Or if you have a letter, if you got a letter from a previous landowner, make sure it's signed. It will be in lieu of this page.
Right.
Okay, now at this point I want to say from this point, what we just dealt with is the constituent parts of your land and what's been happening with it for the last 3 years. Everything else we're doing now is what you're doing now and what you're going to be doing going forward. So if you keep those two in mind, sometimes it seems like we're asking duplicate questions or you're trying to get your head around what it is we're asking. So right now we're talking about, okay, what are you doing today? What do you think you're going to be doing in the next year?
Right. Oops, sorry about that. Thanks, Jane. So yeah, this grower application materials is exactly, we give all the extra information here on where you can look, this Organic Material Review Institute or the WSDA. These two material lists are, as long as they're approved on those material lists, then they will be approved by CCOF. CCOF also has our own internal database that we make available to our clients, and I'll show you this. Since you're not certified clients yet, you can't access this, but once you are certified by CCOF, you can go here and you can search for any material. Say I want to find some form of calcium. I can put in just calcium and hit search, and then our material search is going to give you back everything that we've approved by brand name. It will include OMRI and WSDA listed products, as well as ones that we have reviewed internally on a case-by-case basis for our clients over the last 30 years. And so there's quite a lot of materials on here that you will not find on OMRI or WSDA. And I think more and more manufacturers are not wanting to go through the OMRI process and may just do this through CCOF, but they can't advertise it as CCOF approved because we are not, that's not our goal. We're a certifier. We do this strictly for our clients. But it does make it a lot easier for you, and once you're certified with CCOF, you can go, you can do this, you can say add this material to my OSP, and then our website will lead you through it, so you can put in your name, your email, your certified operation, and client code, and answer these other questions, and then we're going to just add it to your material list, and we'll send you notice that we've done that. At, what is it, Jane? Within 7 to 10 days, I think that we can do that. But basically, if you found it on our approved list, you can rest pretty well assured that it's going to be okay to use. But we do ask you to sign. We acknowledge that you are doing this at your own risk. There's also, of course, the OMRI. And then there's a WSDA material search where you can go and search for products. And let's just see what comes up with calcium over here. And so here's the way the OMRI list that comes out results, 80 results of different types of calciums that are allowed for organic production by brand name and specific use. I'm going to just move that away and go back to this form. You need to be as complete and detailed as possible. We need the full product name, including any formulation, because there are so many different ones out there. For example, like the calcium example, we've got this Calcium Plus, ag grade calcium sulfate. Then there's Calcium Plus, solution grade calcium sulfate, standard prilled. And so you have to be extremely specific so that we make sure we get the right material and approve you for that specific material, because when the inspectors come out and they're reviewing all your receipts for purchases and all your material application records and your material storage area, it needs to be the same one that we've approved you for. Any questions on materials? That's a pretty big topic, and I'm not sure, but there's often questions around that. Molly or Jane, do you see any questions on that?
Not on that. There was one about if you have a converted ranch with only grazing, can you assume no previous spraying? You can't assume anything. You have to document it. For example, I've seen pastures where they've used Roundup to kill noxious weeds, and that wouldn't be allowed. So there is no presumption when it comes to land history. You have to document it one way or another. That's how we're confirming that your land is eligible for certification. And remember, with all of this, what we're doing is we're telling your customers that you met the standards when you got certified and that you continue to meet them as long as we certify you. So it's not like we're trying to catch you out or make you additionally prove things. It's that the whole organic structure, which is the most scrutinized farm-to-table food system in the world, scrutinized and regulated farm-to-food-table system in the world, is confirming to the customer, providing that assurance to them and that confidence that anything that gets sold under the organic label is meeting those standards. So you get to ride on the back of everybody else who's met those standards and who holds high standards. So our job is to make sure that we don't let anybody slip through by presuming things, so that the confidence in that, in the organic logo, gets lower. So
that's great, Jane. Thank you. Then the other thing also to remember is that if you just list everything you think you might want to use, it'll be easier than just listing what you're currently using, so that you don't have to go through the waiting game, say, in the future if you wanted to use something and wanted the assurance that it was approved and on your list. Go ahead and just list it here. We're not going to charge you anything to review these products, and it'll just be basically completing your toolkit and giving you all the tools you need.
it's especially true if you're looking at something about whether there's a pest problem or something that might come up as an emergency. You don't want to have to wait 3 or 4 days or a week to get something reviewed if you feel like you need it immediately to save your crop. So talk to your neighbors. If there's other people who are certified and you don't know what you might want to use and they're doing the same thing you're doing, ask them what's on their list and let them help you build your list.
So I have moved on to the seeds and planting stock section of the OSP. One thing that we haven't really talked about yet, and what was in the email that was sent to you, is that the top of every page of our OSP up here in italics is basically it's the citation from the federal rule that tells you basically what your requirement is as an organic producer. We also sent you a copy of the federal rule, and it might not be the most riveting reading, but it's essential that you understand it and you are familiar with the standard and what's required of you. I've got the manual up here, and I'm just going to pop it up here so you can see what the basic requirements are. This is about, the crop section is what, about 3 pages, 2 3/4 pages, I think, right, Jane? And so it's described here, you know, what is required of you as an organic producer. And here's the basic overlying description of the practices and procedures that you're going to be doing. And here was the list of substances to be used. I'm going to put the spotlight on so you can see where I am. And which is what we just discussed, the whole material section. Later on in your OSP, you're going to be describing your monitoring practices and procedures and the frequency with which they will be performed. You're going to describe your record-keeping system. There is, sorry, I'm going to drop this page down. I have to jump back and forth with the spotlight and with the cursor to bring the page down. Here is the section number, if you look at number 5, this is about the description of management practices and physical barriers to prevent commingling in organic and non-organic on a split operation, and additional information deemed necessary by the certifying agent. The producer may substitute a plan prepared to meet the requirements of another federal, state, or local regulatory program for the organic system plan. But primarily, we try and push our clients into completing this organic system plan that we're looking at today and what we're working on. So the land requirements we reviewed in the last section with the parcel information. And then we're moving here into the soil fertility and crop nutrient management practice standard, and then we'll get into the seeds and planting stock a little further down on the next page. And I'm sorry, I don't want to whip through this too quickly, and it's really not something we plan to read today or to work with you on unless people have specific questions about the rule. it's all here for you, and it was emailed to you, and hopefully you've spent a little time familiarizing yourself.
Elizabeth, if you go back to the form, to the seeds and planting stock form, up in the upper left-hand corner next to the CCOF logo, there's a section citation, a little spotlight, for each form has this on it, and that takes you directly to the section of the standards that Elizabeth was just showing you that apply to that particular form. So if you're confused when you're filling out the form and you don't understand why we're asking the questions we're asking, you come to that specific section in the standards, you read it, and then you go back to the forms and you tell us how you're going to meet that standard. That's essentially what we're asking. The standards are the same for everybody, but everybody's operation is different. So these forms give you the opportunity to say, and this is how it applies to me.
Yep. And while we cite from the rule, it's paraphrased, it's abbreviated, and so it's why we give you that reference section, section 205, 204, is relates to seeds and planting stock, and you can go there and get more details. For example, if you have questions about, like, this isn't clear enough to you, then you can go back and look at that section and figure it out yourself. I mean, there's definitely full transparency here. There's no secrets, and all the information is available to you by looking at the federal rule and looking at the national organic program, the material list, which we'll show you later. So the seeds and planting stock section, basically you describe to us what your protocols are, what kind of seeds you're using. You know, if you're using strictly organic seed, then you just select that, and then if you use inoculants, you're going to complete the sections below. If you can't find the appropriate organic seeds for what your market is or for what your region is, then you may use non-organic untreated seed, but you do need to look for organic seed, and you need to document your search for organic seed before you buy the non-organic. Annual seedlings, you must use certified organic seedlings. So there's no way around that one. With perennial stock, you can use non-organic perennial stock. However, you cannot harvest an organic crop from that perennial stock until it's been under organic management for a year. The commercial availability section B here is where you describe to us why you bought non-organic seed or planting stock. What were the qualities and characteristics that you were seeking that you could not find with organic seeds, and then tell us how you did it. You know, you could just list all the different seed catalogs that you looked at and you couldn't find organic cilantro, for example. So you ended up buying non-organic cilantro. So that when the inspectors come out, they're going to be reviewing this with you, and you can show them any number of ways. You can show your stack of seed catalogs that you've gone through and circled and got email communications or anything. You may have letters from your suppliers that say that they looked and they could not find you any organic seed, and therefore they sold you this untreated and also non-GMO variety. The genetic modification section, this is if you're using untreated seeds or non-organic seeds, then and it's a known GMO crop, then you need to get a statement that it is not a GMO. There's not a whole lot of vegetables. We don't have a lot of corn and soy or canola growers out here, so we don't run into this quite as often. But you know, cotton, alfalfa, zucchini, there's more and more crops are being made available as GMO, and so that the list will increase over time, unfortunately, and you'll have to get this non-GMO statement from the supplier that verifies that it was not genetically modified. Seed treatments. So there are allowed seed treatments, but you need the treatment on the seed is considered a material input since you are putting that into your soil. So you need to make sure whatever type of treatment happens that it is an approved product. And a lot of the inoculants and things are now OMRI approved. And so it's pretty easy to get that, but you need to make sure before you put it in the ground that it's something that's allowed. And then the seed treatment materials, you're going to list these. in the OSP material list. And anything else to add to that, Jane?
No, I don't think so. You'll get referenced back to that materials list kind of a lot, and as you go through it, as you go through these forms, if you keep that one handy, then you get here and you go, oh, okay, I didn't realize I needed to add my seed treatment, so I'm going to go back and add that to the list. So that'll kind of get filled out along with the rest of the forms as you go along.
Okay. And so here is the section on seedlings, transplants, and greenhouses. And really, first thing is like, are your crops grown in a soil mix? Well, if so, then what is that composed of? And then you'll get pushed over to the material list, like Jane just mentioned, to describe to us what's in that mix. The location of your growing facility, it needs to be certified organic. So we'll have to visit that site if it's off-site, not on your farm. We're going to need to go visit, and then we want a list of any planting mixes, fertility, disease control materials. It's all quite different when you're in the greenhouse, and so those are separate materials you need to list on the OSP. If it's organic and non-organic, then we need to know how you're separating the organic from the non-organic and preventing commingling and labeling and prevention of drift of any materials through the greenhouse ventilation system and irrigation system. We like to know what happens with any water and any potential runoff that might be happening. We'll be inspecting that, the outside of your greenhouse. How you're cleaning your seedling containers and any equipment that's used in the greenhouse, and then how you're documenting it. And you could just describe it briefly and attach a sample, would be fine. How are we doing on questions? Any questions there?
We've been trying to answer them one off as they're just kind of individual questions. I will, one did come up, and I want to mention that there's a lot of references to record keeping. We have a document on our website. If you do a search on the search bar on the website for farm support package, and you will get to a PDF document, and at the back of it, it's got sample forms. You're free to use these forms if you want to. You don't have to. There's tons of other ways to do record keeping. But what it'll do is it will show you what kind of records we're likely to ask you to keep. And so when Elizabeth says you need to keep document cleaning of your seedling containers in a mixed greenhouse operation, there's an equipment cleaning log specifically for mixed operations, where you can log each time you clean a tractor that moved from a conventional field to an organic field, or a batch of seedling containers that you moved from conventional to organic parts of your greenhouse, and you can track how you have done that, and you can use those sample logs when you provide your organic system plan and say, this is how I'm going to keep those records. You don't have to always keep them exactly that way, as long as at inspection you can show that you have those records and that the inspector can actually track them. Not just that you're keeping them, but that when they sit down and look at them, it makes sense as in relationship to your operation. There's also a bunch of seed resources in this support package. So if you're looking for seed suppliers, you can find that. There's some organic consultants in the support package. There's a lot of information, probably more than many of you will need, but it's there. It's helpful if you do need any of it.
So I'm just flipping through it on the page here, and it's really easy to get to on our website, just like Jane said. You put it in the farm.
We have a question about length of time for record keeping. We're not asking you to keep records for what you've been doing before. We're asking you to show us how you're going to keep records going forward. And then is it 5 years, Elizabeth, that they have to keep their records?
Yes, they have to be somewhere available for the last 5 years, but for our purposes, we basically want to see your records from each inspection to the next.
Right. And the 5 years start with when you submit your application, when you become a client with us, right? When you submit your
Yes.
application, not
Yeah.
the past 5 years. So this
Right.
is back to that. Everything that happened before we got documented with your parcel information form. Now we're talking about what you're doing now going forward.
Right.
I'm going to keep
and
reminding of that because it gets confusing.
yeah, and it is different with livestock operations. Are there any, is there anyone here at the webinar who intends to do any ruminant livestock certification? Maybe if you could raise your hand or identify yourselves, then we could discuss it directly with you or see how many people might be interested in hearing about that. But the record keeping requirements are definitely a bit higher for the ruminant operations as far as just documenting the grazing practices and the amount of dry matter intake that the livestock are getting out there. And that's something that you would want to keep more available than just year to year. Like this year is really useful for people because of the drought. We're trying to help people show how they graze different months in the last couple of years so they can be eligible for a variance that was granted.
And there's also some documentation for your ruminants. There's and for your mammals, there's a documentation of the animals have to have been managed organically from the last third of gestation. So you need to be able to show the documentation for the moms and how they were managed during that pregnancy up through the time that the animal's been weaned, the baby's been weaned. So there's some different record keeping, and you can email me and we can get you connected. If I can't answer it, then I can connect you to our livestock folks and we can deal with your specific issues because it gets a little more particular.
Just a little.
Well,
okay.
I'm trying not to freak people out.
Yeah, we don't want to go down that road. I'm not seeing the hands raised, but I guess you would have noted if somebody.
We got one answer that there was someone out there with sheep, so we're going to cycle them back to me and we'll get them connected to Val if necessary.
Awesome, that would be great. Okay, so we're moving on to the soil management, and really like what many consider the heart of the organic system plan is how you manage your crop nutrients and soil fertility, and according to the rule, you must manage this through rotations, cover crops, and applications of plant and animal materials in a way that don't contribute to contamination of soil, water. This section is where you can tell us just all your different crop rotations or your plans for how you rotate. If you're in a perennial cropping system or you're using animal rotations, then that is, there's definitely ways that you can describe how you're doing that qualifies for this. We don't expect to see you rotating perennial crops and removing them, but instead to be using cover crops in between the vine rows or in between the orchard trees, or if you've got perennial pastures that you are managing your animal rotations out there, and that will satisfy the requirement for doing some type of rotation and building soil health. We also want to know what are the major components of your soil fertility plan. And here you have any number of things you can select, incorporating your crop residue, manure, compost with manure, compost without manure, and we'll have a whole section. The next section is about compost and how we can review and approve your use of compost, foliar fertilizers, biodynamic preps, crop rotation. All these options are available and expected so that we aren't seeing people who are wanting to be certified organic by default or by benign neglect. Like, we want to see some active planning and fertility building going on. Also to describe to us what your tillage and cultivation practices are and what order are they performed throughout the crop season. This doesn't have to be super specific, but you could give us a general overview of what a typical year involves for you and how you approach. Your monitoring plan, this is also, this is an important section to tell us how do you monitor this? How do you ensure that you are building soil fertility over time? Is it by soil observation, crop yield comparison? How often are you doing this? I mean, many of you are out there every day, and you're observing these things every single day. So perfectly reasonable to put that here and describe how you're doing it. If you're doing testing and you select that you do soil tests and tissue tests, then we will want to review those soil tests and tissue tests. So something to think about. Or maybe you perform testing every 2 or 3 years, and then you can just describe that, and every 2 or 3 years we're going to want to review that with you. Erosion control, if you're farming on highly erodible land or on slopes or anything, then we want to know what you're doing to prevent and minimize erosion altogether. And I think that's all pretty clear. Unless there's a specific question, I'm going to keep moving through to the next section on compost and manure. And it's 10:05, so I think we're fine for time, but just going to keep moving unless there's questions. The compost and manure section, I find people often are concerned that they have to only buy or use manure from organic animals. And actually, this is not true. You can use manure that comes from non-organic operations. If you're using compost that contains manure, there's certain restrictions around the use of manure that you are ensuring that you're getting it to a certain temperature to prevent any kind of contaminants or bacteria from being applied especially to crops whose edible portion may touch the soil. So the rule is very specific on compost that contains manure. You have to get it up to a certain temperature for a minimum number of days. And this is described in detail in the rule in section, 203. Or no, is that 204? Yeah, it is in section 203. Sorry, this is a 2-page section. So 203C. So there's plenty of information in the NLP rule that will give you all the details. But if you have specific questions, of course, you can send them to Jane or CCUF. We do want to know what exactly is in your compost. Manure from a local dairy, bedding, straw, or wood chips, or what's the source of the wood chips, where are you getting, you just need to describe where you're getting all the inputs from. Anything that goes into the compost needs to be approvable, needs to be approved. So if you're buying your compost from a local producer, for example, like Wheeler Zamoroni or Grab and Grow or Sonoma Compost, well, some of those manufacturers, they've submitted their compost ingredients and procedures and descriptions of what they're doing to OMRI or WSDA, and they've gotten approved for those particular types of compost. And I think the local providers here, at least in Sonoma County area, they're all kind of on board. There are some that aren't, that don't go through that formal approval process, and with those you need to get a specific list from them of the ingredients and their procedures, and then send it to CCF so we can review and approve it. And this section here, section D, do you apply uncomposted animal manure? So this is when you apply it. That's an important distinction between like animals grazing in between vine rows or orchard trees. Those are not considered applications by the grower. Those are animals, sheep grazing, and they're just, their manure is being deposited as they move around the orchard. Well, that's not considered an application by you and does not need to be incorporated 120 days before you harvest the crop, or 90 days before you harvest the crop, whose edible portions do not contact the soil. So that's an important distinction to keep in mind. Also, we want to know, if you're spreading manure, how do you ensure that it does not contaminate the rivers and streams or your well? And this final question here is, how do you confirm the manure meets NLP requirements? And this material review request form is something that CCUF has, where you can fill out that information, and we'll guide you through the questions, what we need to review. If you're applying manure only from your own animals, then just select that and move on. and then put manure on your material list. So this next section is also a really important section of the rule, the natural resources. And CCF has worked with Wild Farming Alliance, and we've really tried to push for this on a national level to make sure that all certifiers are implementing this and looking at that section of the rule that pertains to maintaining and improving the natural resources of your operation. And we go through a variety of questions here on, what are your conservation and natural resource management programs? What are you doing to manage water and improve natural hydrology or riparian areas? And if you're doing any kind of restoration work on your riparian buffers or in the wetlands, then here's your chance to tell us about that and how you're managing. Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Can I interject something here? If you're doing a greenhouse operation, this is talking about the area around your greenhouse, the land on which your greenhouse applies or is situated. So you may not have riparian corridors inside your greenhouse, but you do have them adjacent to the parcel of land. So you need to make sure that none of your activities in your greenhouse or around your greenhouse are negatively affecting this. So it's not a matter of it doesn't apply because I have a greenhouse. Is that right, Elizabeth?
Yes, that is definitely right.
That's a question I get a lot, so I wanted to get that in there. So if you're doing a greenhouse and you started to tune out, tune back in.
Tune back in. Yeah, that's important, and I think it's something that CCF has really pushed among all certifiers. We want to see this, and we're starting to also push this in the processing sector, and we want to. We want to really make sure that this section of the rule is observed by all certifiers, not just by us and by our clients. So, yeah, this is important to us, and please, just take time to give us a really detailed description of any of these different sections here. How you're preventing and controlling invasive species. Most organic farmers are on it. They're out there as quickly as they can to prevent these because they don't have the same kind of tools that conventional growers have to grab. And so they're often, it's physical hoeing and hand removal and just being really proactive on that. This section on if you restrict wildlife from entering your production areas for food safety or crop production, or you're eliminating wildlife habitat elsewhere, what practices do you use to mitigate loss of wildlife habitat? I think that's a tough one in some cases because it just depends. People don't have unlimited resources or accesses to land, and anything you're doing though to describe kind of say that you've got a riparian or you've got a wildlife corridor next door, or why it's not applicable, why you don't need to do this. And then any additional measures you're taking to conserve natural resources. For example, you use solar power, you use biofuel. We love to know about those kind of things that you're doing. Conservation involving livestock. This is also, if you've got animals, just to show us what kind of management you have going on to make sure that, that they're not damaging riparian areas and sensitive habitat. I'm just going to keep on moving here into the pest management. So we've got this big matrix here that lets you describe to us all the different strategies that you use to deal with these types of pests.
I'd like to make a point that we are not counting the number of boxes that you check. We're trying to determine that based on what you told us about your operation up to now, what's appropriate. So if you're doing pasture land, you may not be checking many of these boxes, but we're not going to, it's not a test. It's not pass-fail. It's a description of what you're doing. So tell us what you're really doing, and the inspector will help you figure out how well that fits when they're out doing your inspection.
Right. And this also, this is great because it shows us the different physical tools that you're using before reaching for a material. And of course, we love to see that. So Also questions on the first one here is, do you use substances for controlling your weeds, insects, or diseases? And so here's where you'll list those on the material list. And this other section on burning crop residues I don't find that really happens here in this region. But if it does, then you can explain why you're burning crop residues, and it's to suppress a disease or for some very specific reason that is allowed under the rule. It's used to suppress diseases or stimulate seed germination. So pruned branches are not considered crop residue, by the way. And here, this is a bit redundant with the parcel information section, which we've already discussed, and so I'm not going to spend any time on it. You could just write across here, see parcel info, and don't do it again, or make a copy of that one and stick it in here. I'm not really sure why we have these both in this, but anyway, this, I guess actually that parcel information section doesn't include these questions, does it, Jane?
I don't think it does. I think it's just the grid.
Yeah, just the grid. So here's where you can tell us if you're growing crops in buffer areas, then how are you going to manage those and document the separate disposition of those as non-organic? And then you need to keep records to show how you did that. Say you gave it to Crop Mobster or some gleaners or to Marin Organic, then you would just, get them to give you some kind of a document that they came and gleaned that crop for you, or that you give it away to friends and find some way to document that so that the inspectors can verify that when they come out. Those crops were not sold with the rest of the organic. And here's what other safeguards do you use to prevent contamination from drift. If you're on a county road where they spray, then you want to get a letter that shows you wrote to the Department of Vegetative Management at Sonoma County or the county road department, whichever applies. You've notified them. We sell CCUF signs on our website. I think they're like $25 or something, right, Jane? $35?
I don't think they're that.
Depends on the size.
Yeah.
Oh.
One point about county roads, a lot of county road crews kind of routinely spray Roundup along the roads, but very often they will negotiate with you. And if you will maintain, they have a fire safety issue that they have to resolve. If you will say to them, I will mow the road along the side of my field if you will not spray Roundup, as long as you mow the road along the side of the field, they will not spray Roundup if they agree to that. So it's worth trying to negotiate with them before you have to start giving up buffer space and putting in buffer crops along the edge of your field to maintain that. But you have to uphold your end of the bargain, or they're going to say, forget it, we tried that and you didn't do a good job, so we're next year we're going out with the Roundup. So, that's kind of on you for doing that. That's kind of the same thing that Elizabeth was talking about earlier, where you have an agreement with a neighbor who's been spraying Roundup along the fence line, and you'll maintain the fence line if they don't spray the Roundup. It's the same kind of thing. Those are agreements that you can do to lower that risk.
But you do want to document those, so
Yes.
make sure you get it in writing and be able to provide that to CCUF or at inspection each year. Here's where you can give us that inventory of any treated lumber that currently exists.
Did you talk about grandfathering of the treated wood?
I did earlier.
Okay.
We can talk about it again if anyone has
Nothing new. We'll let you do what's already in there, but we won't let you put anything new in.
Yeah. Application equipment, if say you share some equipment with some other farmers who aren't certified, well, maybe they only use organic products, but we don't know that because they're not certified. So you would consider that mixed use equipment, and you would need to get a clean out record or maintain a clean out record when you borrow, say, a seed drill from your neighbor or from the NRCS or whomever. So just make sure we have those forms that Jane mentioned, and I'll pull it over here, that Organic Farm Certification Support Package, and there's a form in there for equipment cleanout. or you can just do it in your own, whatever works for your system. We don't want you to reinvent the wheel and create new forms just to satisfy us. If you capture the information that we need in your own way, on your smartphone, on your little logbook that you keep in your pocket or in your truck, and you can show us that and we approve it, and it contains all the information we need, then that's fine. That's totally adequate. So don't reinvent the wheel or create record-keeping systems that you aren't going to be able to maintain. And I find this a lot with equipment cleaning. Like you've got to make it work for you, however you're doing that. You've got somebody who comes in and does custom farming for you, and then you can just easily have them write it on the bottom of the invoice or something and sign off on it. You can also do purging if you need to. If things aren't cleaned out, then you could get a record that shows that you purged, say, a baler. For baling hay, you purged with one bale or two bales and got rid of all the potential non-organic hay that may have been in the baler before you started baling your organic hay. Irrigation, so here you can just describe to us the source of your water, especially if you're aware of any prohibited materials that may be in your water, then we're going to want to do some testing and see what's going on in there. If you share irrigation lines with other cropland where prohibited materials are applied, this doesn't relate quite as much up here in this region, but it does in some other areas for sure, and it's really important to give us all the details on that and diagrams, piping diagrams, and let us verify that when we come out to do the inspection. Section E, do you store any prohibited materials on farm? So you may store prohibited materials on farm, and maybe you lease land from somebody who has a rose garden and she wants to use something on those roses that is not allowed, and those roses are not in your certification, and she keeps some product. Then you just have to be very clear with keeping it separate and labeling that is non-organic, and it's clear to anybody who comes on site that that is not allowed for use in organic, and that you've got your organic material over here and that's allowed. And if you have Hispanic labor force, then we want to see the signs in Spanish and in English so that it's clear to anybody who may be applying materials to your organic farm that they're not going to mistakenly grab this non-organic, non-approved material and apply it to your certified organic crops.
There's no room for mistakes here. If you apply a non-allowed input accidentally, that land is out of organic production for 3 years.
No.
So you don't want to make mistakes. It's not like there's a forgiveness clause.
Right. Yeah. Do not take it lightly.
We'll forgive you, but we'll also decertify that land. So
yeah, we'll put it back into transition. But yeah, we don't want to see that, and it happens. I've had it happen with biodynamic growers who thought they were using these perfectly these groovy biodynamic preps. They're going out there, they're just misting little foliar reps, and then come to find out there was urea in them, and so they had to pull many acres of grapes and lavender out of the program. So it's important to get everything reviewed and make sure that we are aware of everything being applied. And yeah, like Jane said, no room for error. Harvest and transport. So this, this is your chance to describe to us what you do, how you harvest. If you sell the crop in the field and then you're done with it, then that's it, you're done. But if you're going to be harvesting it, washing it in the field, packing it in the field, washing it up in your processing area or in the barn, then we're going to need to know all the details on this, what kind of substances you may put in the wash water, get that approved prior to using it. If you use chlorine, then it has to be 4 parts per million. So that's the maximum residual disinfectant limit under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And if you're harvesting non-organic and organic crops, then how do you prevent commingling, especially if they're visually identical or parallel crops? Then, we're going to be taking a lot more time at inspection to look at your records and see how you did this and make sure your systems are really strong and in place for preventing any potential commingling. the use of a certified organic facility to process your crops after harvest is something that will require that you give us the certificate of the certified organic facility. We can verify that it's a valid certificate, and definitely something to do before you send your crop off for processing. And storage. So we've got a storage facility description here, and we do have a program, a storage facility inspection waiver, and that's for maybe if you store something that's in pallets or is sealed in boxes and it goes to some, like a freezer or something. Jane, you have other examples of that? Maybe
yeah, if it's fully contained and there's no capacity for cross-contamination, and it's going into storage, then you get the storage facility affidavit, and the storage facility folks will fill out the form and explain how they manage, how they handle your product. This one is for small growers who are selling directly to the public or just harvesting their crop and selling it on. This mostly doesn't apply.
Right. Yeah, it probably won't apply to a lot of the growers in this room.
And the next form, which is the one of having to do with pest control management in storage facility, only applies if you're storing. So when you go on to this form, it can be a little, or the next one, the 6.3, where it says synthetic pesticides in storage. That only applies if you're doing this form and you filled out all of this and you've explained all of this. And this part that she's scrolling through now, pest control preventative measures, if they fail and you need to do something pretty radical, then, only then, do you need to worry about the 6.3 form, which is the synthetic pesticides in storage. So it's kind of confusing. If you're not doing 6.2, you're not, 6.3 is never going to apply.
Right. Okay. This 6.4.
Yeah, this is an important one.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, this one is only if you're an all-organic operation and you're performing simple post-harvest handling operations on farm for only your organic product. So these are the simple activities that apply here. And yes, you just consider the list closely here: washing, drying, dehydrating, hulling, shelling, pressing, hand sorting, sizing, and packing. This form does not apply if you're handling both organic and non-organic, making multiple ingredient products, operating a multi-farm CSA, or doing complex handling such as baking, brewing, extracting. So this is where you can refer to the OSP section, the handler section 1.0, that will describe the other handling services that you may need, and then you may be kind of have to go down the handling route for some other section. But if you're all organic, you're doing all your own, then you can just give us a list of the products and a complete description or a schematic flow of where and how the product is received, processed, packaged, and stored. And I'm just going to move quickly through here because we are getting close to the end. We want to know what you're using in the water, if you're using chlorine or doing double rinsing or residue testing, any of this. And then packaging, what type of packaging are you using? I think we're probably going to have to go a couple minutes over, aren't we? This direct marketing, so this is if you do direct sale to consumers through community supported ag, farm stand, and any of this applies, then you just give us a description of what you're doing. But especially important is if you're reselling or sourcing or brokering from other operations. And if they're organic, then it's a lot easier. But if it's your neighbor that's not organic, then we're going to need a lot more detail from you, and especially in like how you represent and that product when you're at the farm stand or farmer's market or in your CSA box. And it also will increase your audit trail requirements and your record keeping requirements if you are doing selling any products purchased off farm or non-organic products. Labeling, anything that this is one of the main reasons to go through this whole program is so that you can make that organic claim. And whatever claim you're making for organic products is going to require that you say who you're certified by. That's part of the law. And so you want to make sure any labels that you develop that you get reviewed and approved by CCOF prior to using. It could save you a lot of money if you print a label that isn't compliant with the rule and we have to tell you to change it, then you may have 10,000 labels on hand that are not compliant and that you need to get rid of or modify somehow. So make sure you send any labels to us, any retail labels. This section is about non-retail shipping or containers, and this is where you simply describe how you are able to clearly identify the organic products and what kind of markings you have on there. Like if you have your lot, the date it was picked could be your lot number. But organic kale from Lower Field and your harvest date or whatever it is that you're doing, just to make sure that those identifying marks will allow us to track it back to the organic field from which you harvested it. And then here's the retail package labels and labels from other operations. These are getting a little more complicated, but we can take those questions directly from you if anyone has that. And the final section here is the record keeping. And we already have touched on this throughout this session, but basically you need to keep your records at least 5 years. You need to keep input application records that show all your materials applied, and we need to know the date, the rate, and the location. Harvest records need to show the date, crop, and quantities harvested. This may not be feasible if you're selling mixed vegetables at the farmer's market, but you've got your load list or your pick list for the day that you can provide to us. So I've seen some people just take a picture of the load list before they hand it to the market manager. If you can't get a copy of it from the market manager, then you could just do that. But you do need to maintain a list of what was harvested and sold, and then the rest of these records as applicable, your activity log, planting records, etc. And that with that, we do ask you for a sample audit trail. And I see a lot of application review letters that kick back this letter that says we need a sample audit trail, and you are saying, well, I haven't sold anything yet. How do I have an audit trail? Just show us your system. Show us what you plan to use. And as your system evolves, you can update it with us. But try and give us some example of how you intend to have a recall system that links your product from field to sale. And
that's where some of those sample forms can come in handy, because if you go through that list of forms and you go, oh, okay, I go to farmer's market, I need a load list. Here, I'll use this as my sample. And show us what information, by providing our own forms back to us, show us that you're going to be keeping that information. Then over time, if it turns out the best way to do that is in your iPad, that's okay, but you know what information you're keeping. We know you understand you need to keep that information, so we're going to ask for it at inspection. So it's a sample. Are we looking at in-out balance, a mass balance, Elizabeth,
yes,
for growers?
Yes, we are. We're doing that for sample, like just a sample crop or field when we're out.
So what we want two things with your record keeping. We want to see that you can do trace back, that you could do a recall if you had to. And the other is we want to see that you can show that you grew enough of a product organically so that you have at least more that you grew, as much you grew as what you sold. So you're not growing and harvesting 1,000 pounds of peaches and then having low market load lists that showed that you sold 1,500 pounds of organic peaches, because then we're going to want to know where that extra 500 pounds of peaches came from, because you didn't harvest them.
Exactly.
So you need to, and that's another thing of that's how we confirm to your customer that you're doing what you say you're doing, that you're growing these 1,500 pounds of peaches that you sold at the farmer's market.
Yep, and that takes us to the end here of the record keeping section. The next 2 pages are wild harvest, which we're not going to get into. So if there are any questions remaining, I'm sorry we went a few minutes over, but if anyone has a question, can ask it. I'm happy to stay here for a few more minutes. If people need to go, we could have the questions, we could send them out and respond to them to the whole group. Are there questions?
we've been answering most of the questions are fairly specific. The ones that weren't, we kind of fed back, like the one about how to do the forms. We did have someone saying, can't you do the PDF forms electronically? It's a little more complex than doing the e-forms in a Word doc, and that's why we're doing it in Microsoft Word, because it works a little better. We'd love to be able to do it in PDF, but it just got to be too challenging. That was going to be the next step, and then the step after that would be to have an actual online form where you could actually do it online. But
it's in the plans. It's just going to be a while.
Yeah, and Jake Lewin, our Chief Certification Officer, tried very hard to make it work, and he just got bogged down. The whole process got bogged down, and it wasn't worth trying to stop everything else to make it into a PDF form when we already had an electronic form. It just wasn't as convenient for everyone. So that's, of course, then again, not everybody can do a PDF form. So,
all right, so I guess we're wrapping up.
Yeah. Again, if you have specific questions, you can email me at jwave@ccof.org. I will either send you back information on how to get the answer, or if it's very specific, I will walk around the building and find an expert who can answer it for me, and send it back to you.
And then all the participants, I will go ahead. We recorded this session, so we'll send you the link if you wanted to re-listen to this or let others listen to it. We'll send this off to you as well as an evaluation.
Excellent. And then, yeah, any of you who are going to be at the Guild barbecue and fundraiser next week, I'll see you there on Tuesday night. Thank you so much for coming. And let us know if you have questions. We hope to see you out there in the field.
Hey, good luck.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Bye-bye.